You're listening to the Gambling Files podcast, the podcast that's all about the gambling industry. Before we begin, I'd like to say a few words about our very, very special sponsors. Something for you to think about, perhaps, while you listen. Do you never close your eyes anymore when I kiss your lips? Perhaps you need to think about talking to Every Matrix and their new product, Odds Matrix. It's not just some white label solution, it's a turnkey solution. And that's why more and more providers are turning to them to do what they do, to bring their love. Perhaps you're caught in a trap. Can't walk out? Love me too much, baby? If that's the case, maybe you'd like to speak to Optimove, another of our esteemed sponsors. Optimove's specialism is CRM software, and they're the leading provider of this in the iGaming industry. And we love them. We love them. Perhaps you've seen a faded sign at the side of the road while heading down the Atlanta highway, looking for the love getaway. Perhaps that sign said, Ice Barcelona 2025. Because that sign could have been put there by Clarion Gaming, our third and final sponsor. On to the podcast. Hello and welcome to the Gambling Files podcast, the podcast that knows very well where your parents were last night and was with them. I'm your host, John Bruford. My other host, Fintan Costello, isn't here today because, as regular listeners will know, he's on a sabbatical year and is therefore busier than he's ever actually been before in his life. So we will probably mock his hair later in the episode. Luckily, it's not just me rattling on into the abyss. I'm joined by a guest that some of you will know of already, and most of you will certainly know of some of his work. It's a gentleman by the name of Paul Speirs. Is that the right name, Paul?
Paul Speirs-Hernandez.
Thank you. I was wondering if I should go both barrels.
Yeah, sure. Go both barrels, John. We know everyone who listens to you, and we know that you go both barrels all the time. So please go both barrels.
I really do. Sometimes I use both testicles at the same time, Paul, but not all the time. And Paul, we were talking just before we started recording. I'm like, Paul, how should I introduce you? And straight away he said, King of the Realm. I'm like,
yes,
I can totally do that. Paul is president and master trainer, and I had to write that down so I didn't say that wrong. Master trainer with Red Wagon Institute, but also a lot of people in the industry will know Paul's communications work with Steinbeck Communications. Paul's been working for years with GLI, Aristocrat, the Gaming Standards Association,
JCM.
just to name a few. JCM, God, how could I miss out JCM? That's how we first met.
Yeah.
Quick Custom Intelligence now as well.
At Steinbeck.
Really?
Was with Quick Custom Intelligence, yeah. JCM was my first client when I first started the company. And they're still
when was that? How long have you been doing this?
2004. Since 2004.
Holy crap, that's 20 years.
Yeah.
And it was you that introduced me to the legendary Tom Neiman.
Yeah. Super legend.
He really is. And he's been on this podcast several times and on my previous podcast as well. He's my go-to guy for anything about pinball and Chicago. But he's one of those people that, you know, he's had a life. He had a whole life before gambling.
He really has lived some incredible. The stories that come out of him are hilarious and fascinating and amazing, and all the adjectives.
But he's really blasé about these things as well. It's like, you know.
Totally. You would never know. You would never know. Like, oh yeah, I completely changed the world of pinball by bringing in the first branded game to the entire industry. Whatever. It's just very that.
And his office at JCM, I was in his office and I'm like, Tom, why have you got a gold record on your wall? He's like, oh, that. Yeah, that. Like, why? And that story is just like, what the fuck? Fantastic. Big fan of Tom Neiman. And you've introduced me to many legends of the gambling space. Christy Eichelman.
So just to backfill the plot on Tom Neiman, to go way back. So Tom, his agency was my agency when I worked at Excalibur, and Tom hired me away from the operator side and brought me into the agency where he was working. That's how we first met. So we go way back. We go back to 2000, believe it or not. No, 1998. Crazy time.
Wow.
Been a minute.
1998.
Yeah.
It's weird. I can remember where I was in 1998 because there was a World Cup that year. It was a World Cup in France. And I was living and working in Exeter. And it was fun.
That's awesome.
I can't really say more than that without going into the drinking and the depravity, of which there was quite a lot.
Enough about last night, though.
Yeah. I only drink water these days. My body is a temple. Temple of fucking doom. So you've been around in the industry for a long time, and anybody that's listening to this that's in the publishing side of it, obviously you're going to know Paul. But I mean, also you've seen, you get people treated as industry veterans when they've done like 7 or 8 years. Like I think I started on Casino International like 19 years ago. So I did 17 years on Casino International. So I've done 19 years in the industry. You make me feel like a stripling.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
But you've seen such colossal change in that time.
Oh, yeah.
But given your sort of specialist area, or one of your specialist areas, I should say, because we're going to come on to the Red Wagon Institute later. In the field of communications, has much changed? Because, we do still see people just sending out shithouse press releases that are copied and pasted, across the industry. But do you feel as a communications professional, has much changed in communications?
It's funny you would say that. My best friend and I met at UNLV when we were doing our master's program. We were talking, then she hired me at Excalibur after she left. And we were talking yesterday about the change in communication. And when we were at Excalibur, there were 2 distinct camps in our marketing office. There were half of us who thought that the internet was a flash in the pan. And there were half of us who thought, no, this is the future. We should probably get on board with it. And it was a heated debate. And we know how that ended up. Those of us who thought the internet was a thing, have been around. So, communications changed a lot, and we've had to adapt to those things. They're with the onset of social media and then the fragmentation that social media has brought on. There certainly is a lot of different ways to reach various audiences. Even within the gaming industry, although we're reasonably self-contained, there's a finite audience of who you want to reach, whether that's on the operator side. Expand that out to players is an entirely different animal. However, just on what we do at Steinbeck Communications, we strictly focus on B2B. So it's a little more contained. However, we have to be mindful of how communications have changed, not the least of which is people's attention spans. There was an interesting study several years ago now about the effects on YouTube's effect on attention spans. And they found that the average video length was about 3 minutes long. And by the time the study was published, attention spans had decreased, and the average video was then 2 minutes long. So they updated it, and by the time it was published, it had reduced to 90 seconds. And now, of course, it's TikTok, and you have to communicate in 10 seconds. And with Twitter, you have to, with the onset of Twitter, it forced us as communicators to get to the point in 140 characters. So what it's done is we can talk about the ramifications of people's shortened attention span as a whole different subject matter. However, for the communications professional, it's forced us to get to the point much faster. And I think that's actually been very good. I think that's been a good way for people to be more succinct in their messaging and to really cut to the chase and communicate what it is you really want to say off the top and what it means to the reader. So for the frustrations that I have with social media and people's decrease in attention span as a communications professional, I think it's been good for the field of communications just because it has helped us be more concise. The irony, of course, of me saying that was a very long and rambling answer to say it's helped us become more concise, period. 60 characters.
But with that short attention span that I have, it gave me the time to think about a new kind of themed casino
Other
resort.
things.
Now, bear with me here, right? You're a movie fan, right?
Yes, I am a movie fan. Yes.
A British filmmaker called John Boorman, and Boorman famously directed the big King Arthur epic Excalibur back in about 1980.
Mm-hmm. He did.
But just imagine if you had a resort casino based on other John Boorman films. Because probably his most famous film was Deliverance. Imagine a Deliverance-themed casino.
Imagine a Deliverance-themed casino, if you will. I would like to see a Rocky Horror Picture Show-themed casino. I think that would be hilarious and fun, and there's so many layers to that you could just have a good time with.
You really could. There are other. You could have a Annie-themed casino. In which you only employ orphans, but there's a lot of potential here. Do you know what I mean? And we could help a lot of disadvantaged groups with this, I think. But if you don't want to, Paul, that's on you.
I think now I got my brain going like a Lord of the Rings would be kind of super fantastic, and you get like
that would employ people with hairy feet
on occasion. Yes, it would employ people with hairy. So you would be first in line.
Seriously, one of the best things that ever happened to me was Hobbits on the cinema screen. I was like, I felt so seen. So listen, the Red Wagon Institute, it's been around for a little while now, right? And you've been sort of very steadily growing this under the radar kind of thing.
Yes.
How long's that been rolling for?
Since 2018.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So 6 years now.
Now, I remember several years ago. I can't think how far back, but I read a book you'd written. Is it okay to mention that?
Of course.
Which was called, and unfortunately, with my accent, this isn't going to make any sense, is it? It was called.
Give it a shot.
I don't know how to say it. Curing. No, I can't say it.
Well, you just did. I'll say it for you. Would that be helpful? It's called Curing Cancer with a T. So it's spelled CANTCER. Curing Cancer.
But of course, I'm English, so I say can't. I can't say curing cancer.
Why not?
Makes me sound like I want to be royal.
Well, you are a wannabe royal. That's the thing. That's the fun part.
But it's about curing negative thoughts. Coming into things with a new approach. And it was. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a very fine read. You're a very good writer. I appreciate it. It sounded really patronizing, didn't it? So sorry. But no, it's a terrific read. But I can't help thinking that the Red Wagon Institute was born out of the same school of thought that led you to write Curing Can't. Fuck's sake.
That's exactly
writing
what
your
happened.
book.
Oh, you're fine. You're fine. No, that's exactly what happened. Because I wrote the book, and what we found was it's really the basis for the entire Red Wagon Institute. And so we do have a class called Curing Cancer. And just to reemphasize for people who are listening, it's CANTCER. And it's about getting can't out of your life. That's what we mean by that. And it really became the jumping off point for the entire Institute, where we've built all of our classes around this central idea of the difference that positivity and positive action will make in someone's life. And it's been a phenomenal journey. And, I'll tell you, so we have, Curing Cancer and itself is a 2 full day class of ours. It's one of in our arsenal. We have a 2 full day class called Curing Cancer, specifically about the principles in there. However, as we built everything else around it, we've also developed a keynote address, 45-minute version. That's a quick flyover of this 2-day class. And that's been a phenomenal bit. We've recorded that. We've performed that for a few different audiences. And that's an emotional journey. It's difficult. And however, the things that you learn in 45 minutes are quite rewarding. And we had one gentleman come up to us at the end of one class. He said, I don't know why I was supposed to be at this conference, and this is the reason. And I said, tell me more about that. He said, well, because my son's not going to kill himself now, because what I've just learned today. And we've had other people who call us 8 weeks later, and they'll say, that was the day our sales team changed. In 8 weeks, we've turned our profits up 225%. We just don't allow we don't say try, we don't say but, we don't say can't. And the difference of just taking those 3 words out has made all the difference that we were looking for. So it's been a phenomenal journey. That's incredibly rewarding to have people's lives be impacted so deeply. I had one, after the 2-day version, I had somebody call me 4 years later, literally 4 years later, and say, listen, here's the thing. And I hadn't heard from her for 4 years. She says, here's the thing. I thought your class was a bunch of touchy-feely, hokey crap when I was in it. And 4 months later, I was sitting at a stoplight and everything clicked. And I just want you to know that the 5-year plan we worked on in class, I've accomplished everything on my list except for one thing, which is have a second baby, and I'm 6 months pregnant. I just want to let you know the difference it made. That's incredibly rewarding, right? Like to have people's lives change. And what's funny is my lead trainer and I, Betty, we say to each other all the time, look for the difference. Before every class, we say, look for the difference. And what we mean by that is our core class is called From Managing to Leading. And in 8 hours, people are sitting taller. They're speaking more confidently. They're interacting better with their peers. They're standing taller. And that you can literally see the difference as they become empowered with what we do. And it's incredibly personally, emotionally rewarding to watch the change happen in people. It's amazing. I love what I do. I'm the luckiest person on the planet. Seriously.
There's some pretty lucky people out there, Paul.
Yeah.
I'm not saying you're not one of them,
and I'm
but
the luckiest person.
Luckiest though? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. 100%. Yeah.
Okay. Well, they do say if you do what you love, you'll never work a day in your life. Especially if what you love is sitting on your ass and not working. But I mean that's fabulous, and I think the thing about leadership, right? I mean, I think the sort of 80s and 90s might have distorted reality a little bit with this idea of fucking alpha male nonsense and all of that shite. And this idea that the loudest or most aggressive. Sorry.
Let me jump in. There's a great book called Cultures of Growth. Just came out, and it studies that exact thing. So back in the 80s and early 90s, it was called Cultures of Genius, and companies were famous for it. They would hire and fire to a genius culture, and every year the theory was you have to fire 20% of your staff and replace them to make sure that you always have the geniuses working. Well, finally, there was a company who said, well, wait a second. 85% of our revenue comes from one group of 50. And you're telling me I have to get rid of 20% of the staff who brings in 85% of the revenue. And they finally realized that that model does not work. So what this one researcher just found was that genius culture can be overcome by developing growth culture within individuals. And so she taught that theory for about 15 years. And finally, one of her students came in her grad level and said, no, it's not the individual, it's the culture. So working together, they just wrote a new book called Cultures of Growth, and that identified that when you embrace a culture of growth within the entire culture, then individuals become empowered. And then you ease past that genius idea, which simply just doesn't work. And the basic premise is, so you go into you call it university. You go to university, and there's that first year class as a freshman, and there's 400 people in the class. And the professor walks in and said, 4 of you will get A's, and the rest of you are not going to. That's genius culture defined. Picture that same class where the professor walks in and says, everyone in here is capable of getting an A. And I'm going to give you the tools and the information you need to make that happen. That's a much different approach. And so what you're talking about with the toxic masculinity culture of the 80s and 90s was driven by genius culture, which has now morphed into really, really smart companies have changed to growth culture. And it has made all the difference in their bottom lines. It's a great read, though. I'm looking at my shelf. Cultures of Growth. Fantastic book. It's phenomenal.
I have made a note of it. But actually, the culture thing...
I dog-eared literally every page, which I don't know that it makes much sense to dog-ear every page in a book. However, that's how it ended up.
I've had the conversation about culture with a few people recently, because it's kind of it's not just walking the walk as well as talking the talk. There has to be a buy-in across the organization. So, like, say for example, say you're an online gambling operator, and you are making all the right noises about responsible gambling. Well, you might have signed up to all the best software and all of that stuff, but if your engineering team haven't integrated it yet, you're talking out of your ass. You haven't bought into it because you haven't made it a priority for them. Right. And it's kind of, it's not, I don't know, culture's this amorphous, constantly shifting thing. You know, it's a sourdough starter, and mine's in the fridge, and it might even be dead now. I'm really not sure. I don't really want to take the lid off just in case. But it's a difficult thing to define. But you can see where it's easy to see when it's wrong, and it's easy to see when it's right. But how do you achieve that? How do you, as a manager, as a person, say you're even middle management, but say you're C-suite in some company, how do you actually affect change within an organization? Is it possible for an individual to do that?
Sure. And I think what you brought up was two different questions. First is, how do you establish culture? And the second is, how do you create change? And A leads to B and B leads to A. So it's not, culture and change are not destinations, they're journeys, just like trust. And trust is earned every day. And trust is based on relationships. So you have to have relationships with the people and departments across your company. And those relationships start with knowing who you are and what your values are and communicating those values to other people. And when you are aware of your shared values as a company, that really defines your culture. And when you stick to those values and execute across those values, that makes a difference. The other thing that makes a difference is when you eliminate the words like managers and coordinators. Those are titles. That isn't what people need to do, though. You know, everyone needs to be a leader, period, full stop. You have to lead where you are. And, in our managing to leading class, I've had classes where literally the receptionist and the CEO have been in the same class. And I tell whoever my company contact is, I don't want to know titles. I just want to know first names, and that's it. Like, we don't research who people are. We don't go on their LinkedIn. We don't find out, because I don't care. Like, it doesn't matter to me when you're in my class. It doesn't matter to me what your title is, because what I know is what I'm teaching is the principles of leadership, and that matters. Because, for example, in receptionist level, I need that receptionist to be a leader so that when he or she answers the phone, he or she is empowered to handle what comes in. And that's the first contact any person is going to have with a live representation of the brand. They might go online and interact with the brand that way. However, that first person needs to lead that conversation. If they're not empowered to do that, you're not empowering your staff to have positive interactions with your customers. Up to the CEO, who, if the CEO and the receptionist are speaking the same language of leadership, which is what we teach, that makes all the difference in the culture. And that allows people to affect change. So here's some challenges we have in our culture. Here's some opportunities we see within our industry. Now, working together, now that we know what our roles are and we can make some good decisions and set some goals, we can affect change positively, both within individuals and in our company and across the industry we look at. So that was another long-winded answer to your question. However, outside of the Twitterverse and in 140 characters, that's really what we do. And that, I think, when people know who they are and they know what their values are and they communicate those values, that's the establishment of culture. Where people get off track, of course, is when they forget who they are. When you forget who you are, that's when you get off track.
How do you forget who you are?
People forget who they are all the time. People forget who they are all the time. They get wrapped up in the tactics of things, and they forget the strategy of things. And strategy is based on who you are. So it's easy to get distracted by tactics. It's easy to go down path. And sometimes you are so far down a path you've forgotten. There's all sorts of different trainings that involve ropes courses. If you've ever been on one, you know what I mean. And you're usually blindfolded and you're going down a rope path, and you'll get far off course, and the guide will bring you back. And that's a metaphor for what happens so easily in business and in life, is you simply go off track, and you need someone to help bring you back. And when you have your values established and they're written down and everyone's accountable to those values and to each other and empowered to bring people back, it makes all the difference. It's all the difference in your culture. That's where successful companies live.
Okay. So all that touchy-feely crap you do.
Can you tell?
Yeah,
yes.
No, and I want to get into the touchy-feely crap now.
Yes, sir.
As that lady described it.
As she said, yeah.
Brilliant.
And what's funny about that, John, is we say all the time in class, we say, whether it's a 45-minute class or whether it's a 2-day class, we say this is filled with way homers. So don't panic if it doesn't make sense today. And what we mean by way homers is you get it on the way home. That's exactly right. So what will frequently happen is someone will be sitting at a stoplight, and they don't know that their RAS in the back, at the top of their brainstem in the back of their head, has been thinking on stuff and thinking on stuff and thinking on stuff. And then suddenly it will make sense, and everything will click, and you'll get the whole picture of everything we were talking about, that how it applies to you personally. You're like, oh, I get what that crazy guy was talking about. Now it all makes sense. You know what? I do say try all the time, and that's dumb. Yoda was right when we were 7 years old. Do or do not, there is no try. That makes perfect sense to me now. Why have I abandoned that simple principle that I learned as a 7-year-old, and now I'm 47 and I say try all the time? Suddenly it makes sense. The class is just filled with way homers that just click for people. And that's the moment I love. I like watching it when it happens in class, obviously, because that's fun to see. And where I like getting the phone calls and the emails 5 months and a year later and saying, oh, now I get it. Way homers.
I was just trying to think of any way homers I've had in my life. And there's only one that stands out. Sometimes I think I overshare on this podcast. But many years ago, I was working in this secondhand bookshop, and I'd been about 19, I think. So I'd had my first publishing job, and then I was just doing a bit of other shit. And I was in this bookshop, and this girl came in with some wicker baskets. And she's like, "Oh, my parents got this shop upstairs, and it's closing down today. And I've got these wicker baskets. One of the owners of this bookshop, they bought these, and so I'm just bringing them down." I'm like, okay. Anyway, we got chatting. She was lovely. And she stayed for a cup of coffee, and we smoked a couple of cigarettes because I used to smoke. And things are going swimmingly, and I'm thinking she's quite clearly out of my league, but, we're having a lovely time. Anyway, she comes back down a few hours later, round about closing time. And she says, "So, look, my parents are going away. And they've left some money for me." Well, no, my parents, do you want to stick around in the town I was in? Do you want to stick around and maybe go for a smoke, a couple of drinks? And I'm like, well, I would, but I've got a return bus ticket and I've got to get on that bus because otherwise I can't get home. She's like, "Oh, yeah." And she said, but my parents will have left some money for me at home, so I can give you the money for the train to get back. And I'm like, "Oh, that's really kind, but what if they haven't left the money?" She's like, "I see what you mean, but they definitely will have." I'm like, "No, I really should get on the bus." So I get on the bus, and I'm halfway home, and I realized, she was totally hitting on me. She was basically saying, "Oh no, you'll have to stay the night." I mean, I may be slightly reaching there, but she was definitely saying, "Stick around, we'll chill." And unfortunately, she had a very common name, so I was unable to ever locate her. Not that I tried particularly hard, but she did have a very, very common name. Kate Smith, that was her name. She was lovely.
Kate Smith, yeah. And look at her now.
Yeah, I'd like to, but I can't, Paul. I don't know where she is. Maybe I should put one of those ads in a newspaper. "Are you Kate Smith? Did you bring some wicker baskets to a bookshop once?"
There you go.
I was that young man with hair. Those were the days.
Although I've stopped smoking now, so bonus.
Yeah, but what if she still smokes?
Maybe she does. I don't know.
Plus, she'd be over 50 now. She'd be over 50 now, Paul. Okay. Which would actually be fine.
You.
Yeah, so am I. So.
It'd be fine. It'd be a good match. Probably even better. You both would calm down. You don't have to worry about using euphemisms for, "I have train money." You can just say, "Why don't you spend the night? Now you're 50, or you can just own who you are now."
Yeah,
it's the greatest thing about turning 40, frankly. You turn 40 and you just realize that the games are over and you can just be who you are. It's the greatest age ever. And then you turn 50 and you realize 40 was just the beginning of my awesomeness. It's the best thing ever.
I think a lot of people are still fucking about and playing games at my ripe old age.
Yes, and that's a choice at this point, though. When you're under 40, you have to. When you're over 40, it's a choice because you can just be who you are, and it's amazing. Nothing more to prove to anybody, and it's great.
No, that proving stuff to people thing, I'm lucky. I learned that one really young. But apparently, I was reading this self-help book. It's really good. And apparently, I am what's described as hyper-independent because I learned at a very young age that I can't rely on anybody else.
I like that. Hyper-independent.
Swings and roundabouts.
Interesting term.
Yeah, it's not the best for building intimate relations, though. Sorry, relationships, not intimate relations. That's very different thing.
I know what you meant. It translated into American just fine.
So I know that you've done. I know that you've taken the Red Wagon Institute into places like GLI and Aristocrat. But I mean, this is. I mean, it's growing, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's one of the things I love about it is on this Steinbeck Communications side, we are really specific. Like we do B2B communications for the gaming industry, and that is what we do. I'm very certain what we do. I'm very certain about what clients we do and don't work with. On the Red Wagon Institute side, it's leadership training. Everyone's welcome to come to the party. So we've consulted with and done training for all sorts of different types of industries outside of the gaming industry as well as inside. And that's what's exciting about it to me is it's bringing the concepts of leadership to all sorts of different groups. Organizations, like we've worked with some nonprofit groups and some groups with the state of Nevada and all sorts of different organizations that we've either consulted with or done trainings for. And that's been really, really fun. You know, I love the gaming industry. It's obviously where I've been since 94. And it's also fun to take this new concept of leadership training and be outside of this fun industry as well. I'm going to leave camera for just a second. I've got to grab my cord and plug in. So I notice my laptop is jonesing for coffee, as we might say.
At least it's not a cat, and the cat is setting the dog off, etc. You know, I feel like the old woman who lived in a shoe.
The last 20 minutes. I've been listening for about the last 20 minutes. Something is being dug into in my house. My cat is being very aggressive and active on this morning. So I get to go after this, discover what's been modified.
Does your cat have a name?
Nico.
Nico, is that with an E or an I?
Nico.
So named after the early Steven Seagal film, no doubt.
Yes, no doubt. Yeah, I'm assuming that's what happened. He came to us named Nico, and it fit. So he's been our little baby for 9.5 years.
Wow, 9.5 years.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's good cat work. I've got Bernard Pickle. It's what happens when you let the kids name the cat.
Right. I always thought Cold Beer would be a really funny name for a cat. Because then you can pretend you're at a ball game. Like when you call them in at night, you can just go on your porch and yell, "Cold Beer!" Or get two cats and name one Pepsi and one Red Hots. Same kind of idea. Pepsi, Red Hots. You always pretend you're at a ball game.
Also works, except I
don't know what they...
Oh, there's no equivalent here.
Yeah. It'd be like ale and what, like pasties or something. What do you yell at a soccer game? Pasties?
Yeah. Probably, yeah.
But cat named Pasties.
Bovril and pies, basically. But for my cat, I have to stand on the back doorstep and meow. I do. I stand on the back doorstep. I give it a meow, and I just hear him from fairly far away. Just give it and then I know he's on his way.
And then
things we do for cats, man. Things we do for cats.
The things we do. Yeah,
it's crazy. Why is it called the Red Wagon Institute?
Oh, okay. This is a 2-minute story, although it's fascinating at the same time. So sorry for the Twitterverse not happening.
Bring it. This is a long-form podcast.
It's a long-form podcast, so it's great. So I don't know what you call it. In America, we call it kindergarten. So you go to preschool when you're little, and the first class in the first grade in the formal schooling is called kindergarten. And we're in kindergarten, and kindergarten's great. It's a half day. You go morning or afternoon, you show up, and it's awesome. You get snacks, and you take naps, and you play in the sandbox, and who wouldn't want that? And, so we go to the first half of the year, and it's very that. And we come to the second half of the year. It's just after Christmas when we walk in, and things had changed because now instead of the snack coming to you, you got to go get it. So Mrs. Heslop called me and Carol to the front of the class, gave us the red wagon and said, "Go get the snack." And she shut the door behind us. And that was literally all she said, was "Go get it, shut the door." And the school I went to was one of those 1940s era buildings. It was this big, long rectangle with 2 stories. And the kindergarten, for some reason, was next to the bomb shelter. I guess it was because we could run the slowest. So we had to be next to the bomb shelter. And we had one of those submarine lights with the yellow bulb inside with the guard around it. And that was the only light outside of our hallway. So it was really dark. So we're in the dark next to a bomb shelter, facing this ramp. and we're holding a wagon together, and we knew we had one task, and that was go get it. So we and I remember distinctly, like it was this morning. I remember looking at Carol and she looking at me, and I remember thinking, we can't do this. There is no way we can do this. We can't do this. So we started walking, and we passed the first grade classes, and then the second grade classes, and the third grade classes. And we're walking, there was a door at the end of the hallway with the sun was blaring off the snow. So we're walking towards the light the entire time. And we got to this room, and there were 6 women dressed all in white who filled our wagon up and said, go share this with everyone you know. So we turned around and we walked back, and the walk back was much, much shorter for some reason. It took, while the walk up there took 7 hours, the walk back took 7 seconds. And so we came in, and everyone was so happy to see what we'd brought them. And there's all sorts of metaphors there. So, and it was also the moment I changed can't to can. It was that first moment in my life. As a 5-year-old, I'm like, oh, we can do anything. If we can go get snacks for people, we can literally do anything. And it was a life-changing moment. And I thank God for Mrs. Hessel for just slamming the door behind us. What I realized much later, though, was that all along the way, along that entire pathway, where behind every door was rooms filled with people who'd made that journey before us. All we had to do was ask, and they would have told us what to do. And everyone was so happy with what we brought back. And so that's why we named the company the Red Wagon Institute, because you get and bring back information. And our tagline is, take everything you learn and share it with everyone you know. And it's all wrapped up in that metaphor of that particular day in January in 1974. That's why it's named. That was not the TikTok nor the Twitter version of that story. However, that's the story of the name of the company.
It was the right version.
Thank you. I love it. I actually called Carol and asked her if I could tell that story using her name. And she started to cry, and she's like, I remember that day. It was such a changing day in my life. And it was funny because we hadn't talked about it since that day. So 40 some odd years later, we both remembered that as a pivotal moment in our lives. And that's really what I'm hoping for. When someone comes to our leadership training class, they know what they're getting into. They have come in with preconceived notions, and we hope that they're able to leave those preconceived notions at the door and come out with what the training was. And I always am mindful of, this is going to be a changing day. Like this, if they take away the learning and apply it, this will be a changing day in their life, just as it was for Carol and I back in the day.
It also feels very you that you still know the person that you went to get the snacks with.
I know, right? Yeah.
Excellent. So listen, is there anything sort of, are you planning on expanding what the Red Wagon Institute does? Is there a way to take it to more people, or is it organic growth? What's next?
All of that, yeah. So, we started off with just a couple of classes. Now we have 3 distinct areas that we offer. We offer leadership track with 4 classes in there, team building with 5 classes in there, and then communication with about 8 different classes. And, what's interesting is people come to us all the time and say, well, what we need, this is a challenge we have. Do you have something that will fit? And I'm teaching a class tomorrow and the next day, 2 different classes that we didn't have something that would fit. So we wrote completely new material based on this need. And that's another thing we do. I don't want a one size fits all people, because maybe this piece would work, maybe this piece works. And I don't know, what if we create a whole new thing for you? That would probably be better. So we create new material for folks all the time. So do we change? Yeah, because people say, we have a challenge you might not have thought of before. So, okay, let's build a class for you.
Excellent. Because there's no point in just selling something if nobody wants it. You got to give them what they're looking for, right?
Well, you have to help people with what they need, right? If someone needs a Band-Aid, you don't offer problems. Them yes, that's right. Yeah.
A Band-Aid, my God. I remember going into a shop in Vegas and saying, excuse me, do you sell plasters? And a woman was like, do we sell what? Plasters? Well, what do you mean? Like sticking plasters, you know? And luckily I had an American with me who just went, he means Band-Aids.
I grew up in a construction family, so I would have also given you that very blank plasters. No, you got to go to Home Depot. That's where you're going to find the plasters.
The worst example of that, right? This is far enough back. This was at the Aladdin, I think, became Planet Hollywood.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm in the Aladdin, and I knew enough to take my own tea bags with me. And I get into my room and I go to make a cup of tea, and there's no fucking kettle. And I get into the front desk and I say, excuse me, there doesn't seem to be a kettle in my room. And the lady looks at me and she just goes, a what? There's no kettle in my room. She goes, kettle? I'm thinking, oh, fuck, what have I got here? And I go, yeah, it's kind of like, it's usually made of injection molded plastic, and it's got a heating element in the bottom, and it boils water for drinks. And it's like, I didn't know where else to go with it. It's like, if we're stuck on the word kettle, we're screwed. And she was like, oh, right, no, we don't have those. Oh, okay. Thanks.
Kettle. Oh God, that's awesome.
It's seriously, every time I use the word kettle these days, I have her in the back of my head going, kettle. Oh man, I'm such a bad tourist. Such a bad tourist. I was never tempted to take my own kettle though. That would have been too much. It's just been too much.
That's a lot to take on a plane. Yeah, that's a lot to pack and get through customs and security.
Yeah. It's not going to work.
Of course, I mean, going here would make sense because, you know, your version of the TSA would be like, oh yeah, if you're going to America, you need to take your own kettle. Getting out of the country would be quite something else.
They'd be like, what is this? And I'd be, kettle?
Yes, kettle.
My God, what do they call kettlebells in the US? But anyway. Paul Speirs, thank you very much for joining us. I continue to, I love it when you post stuff about the Red Wagon Institute on LinkedIn because it's relentlessly positive. You know, you post about the transformative effect of things. And the thing is, I guess maybe I look at it differently from how somebody else might look at it because I know you and I know what kind of character you are and the power of your personality. And so it's very easy for me to picture you changing a bunch of lives in a room doing touchy-feely shit. Just kidding about touchy-feely shit.
Thank you.
But no, I can see that this is a calling, I suppose, for want of a better way to put it.
I really do absolutely love it. It's what I you know, it's funny because in my, you know, we all go through phases of life. And in one of my phases of life, I don't know that I had any friends who weren't entertainers, singers, dancers, some type of entertainer. Like literally everyone I knew was in entertainment. And I was always curious because you hear folks in entertainment say all the time, this is what I have to do. It's my oxygen. I don't know. I couldn't breathe if I wasn't on stage or if I wasn't doing whatever they do. If I wasn't performing at a concert piano, so if I wasn't singing or if I wasn't acting, I didn't know what to do. And it never made sense. I'll be perfectly honest. Like I would listen to them and I wouldn't say anything. I'd be like, oh, that's great. And it never made sense until I did this. And I love it so much. It's my absolute oxygen. It's my passion. And to be able to, in the course of 8 hours, watch someone physically change in front of you because the difference you're making inside of them, it's quite something. I never, ever would have guessed that would happen when we first started the company. It's impossible to describe to people. And it's amazing when it happens. It's phenomenal when it happens. And it's funny because, the class will end and we'll shut the door behind the last student, and Betty and I usually will just lay on the floor for about 10 minutes because we've left it all in the field. Like, you give 100% for 8 hours all the time. And what's funny about our brains is, we usually live at about 20% of our brain capacity just to get through life. That's why we can drive home and not remember how we got there. And when you live in your conscious brain, you're doing 100%. It's exhausting because we don't do it all the time. And it's so rewarding. It's just incredible. And I love helping people. And to be able to help people in this way has been a phenomenal journey.
Super. Now, is this solely in person, or do you do online stuff as well?
We do online training as well. Yeah. In fact, we've got the month-long gig. We're going to be actually 2 months. We're going to be teaching people on how to be better speakers with our speaker training class. And that's all going to be online because the way they execute is online. So it made sense to do it that way. Now, if they were speaking in person, it would be like, now we need to get together. However, their delivery vehicles are, when they speak to their audiences, it's all online. So it makes sense to do it that way. So, the other classes are much more difficult to do online. That's why we created a keynote version of Curing Cancer, was because all of our classes are so highly experiential, because that's the way adults learn, frankly. After 22, if you're not using an experiential format to teach folks, they're just not going to retain what you're teaching. So that's why we developed the 45-minute version, because people can listen to that in sort of a podcast format and get it. It makes much more of an impact when you're online. And the speaker training is one of those things that actually works online. We got really lucky with that one.
Okay. How can people reach you to find out more?
redwagoninstitute.com, or you can email me at paul@redwagoninstitute.com. Funny how those are the same, right? You can follow me on LinkedIn. I'm at Paul Speirs-Hernandez with a dash, Paul Speirs-Hernandez. You can find me on LinkedIn. Reach out. We'd love to talk to you. And, I'll be perfectly honest. Like, we talk to people, we listen to what their needs are. If we can help them, great. If we're not able to help them, we'll help them find someone who can. Just exactly like we do on the Steinbeck communication side. There's things that we don't offer. And we have a wicker basket full of names of people who we can help, who do things that we don't do, and we help them find the right person. So we're just here to help folks on both sides of the business.
I mean, as a person that has personal experience of your good self, I would heartily endorse you for this, which does lead me into something I should have done at the start, which is to thank this podcast's benevolent sponsors. Because we are sponsored by and brought to you today by the mighty, magnificent Clarion Gaming, by the considerate, gentle, but experienced lovers of Optimove, the iGaming industry's #1 CRM software, and the stallions, the virile stallions at Every Matrix. So thank you to them for making this possible. Paul Speirs, as ever, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Good to see you again. More of you, less of everyone else. That's what I always say.
Stay metal.